In 1347, Europe was loud. Church bells rang every hour. Markets shouted prices. Carts rattled over stone streets. People complained about taxes, about work, about hunger. Europe was not peaceful, but it was alive. In 1348, it went quiet. Not because of war, not because an empire collapsed, but because the people disappeared. For centuries, medieval Europe had functioned like a living machine. Not efficient, not humane, but balanced. Every role mattered. Peasants planted and harvested the food, carters moved it from village to town, merchants sold it, clerks recorded it, judges enforced the law, priests buried the dead and blessed the living. The system was fragile, but as long as everyone showed up, it survived. Then, in the space of a single year, millions didn't. The plague did not arrive as an invasion. There were no banners, no armies, no declarations. It arrived quietly. One ship, one port, one cough. Within months, entire cities lost a third, then half of their population. Not over generations, not over decades, months. Courts stopped meeting, fields went unharvested, armies dissolved without fighting. There were laws, but no one left to enforce them. The plague did not destroy Europe's institutions, it made them irrelevant. A society does not collapse when buildings fall. It collapses when the people who make it function are gone. By 1348, Europe had reached that point. In some towns, the dead outnumbered the living so quickly that burial itself became impossible. Bodies were left in homes, in streets, in churches. The bells rang so often that eventually they stopped ringing at all. And when the sound finally faded, something far more dangerous followed. Silence. If this story is helping you see history in a new way, subscribe to the channel. It's the simplest way to make sure stories like this keep getting told. The silence did not mean peace. Silence meant absence. No workers in the fields meant no harvest. No harvest meant hunger, even where the plague had not yet arrived. In the countryside, crops rotted where they stood. Grain prices exploded. Livestock wandered unattended through empty villages. In cities, the effects were immediate and terrifying. Shops closed not because they chose to, but because no one was left to open them. Courts existed on paper, but judges were dead. Laws still existed, but fear had replaced them. In many towns, night watchmen stopped patrolling. Prisons were abandoned. Debts went unpaid. Contracts became meaningless, not because people rebelled, but because the system no longer had enough people to function. Giovanni Boccaccio, writing in Florence, described a world where fathers abandoned sons, wives fled husbands, and neighbors avoided one another as if contact itself were lethal. The sick were left alone. The dead were left where they fell. In some places, houses were sealed shut with the infected inside. In others, entire streets were simply avoided, left to rot in isolation. Religion, the backbone of medieval life, faltered under the weight of reality. People prayed together and died together. Priests administered last rites until there were no priests left to do so. Faith did not disappear, but certainty did. If God was punishing humanity, no one could agree on why. And when meaning collapsed, fear rushed in to replace it. Rumors spread faster than the disease. Poisoned wells, cursed air, divine wrath. Entire communities were blamed, hunted, and destroyed by people desperate for something, anything, to explain the disaster. The plague did not just kill bodies, it stripped away trust. By the end of 1348, Europe no longer resembled the world it had been. Not because every city was destroyed, not because every institution vanished, but because the invisible threads that held society together had been cut all at once. And when the plague finally began to slow, those who survived stepped into a world where everything familiar still stood, but nothing worked the way it had before. When the plague finally loosened its grip, Europe did not celebrate. There was no victory, no relief, only exhaustion. Those who survived walked through familiar streets that no longer felt like home. Houses stood, but families were gone. Churches stood, but faith had changed. Fields remained, but there were not enough hands to work them. Something invisible had shifted. For the first time in centuries, labor became scarce. For the first time, peasants could demand wages. For the first time, the old balance cracked. The world before 1348 had depended on obedience and abundance. The world after it would be shaped by absence. This was not the end of the Middle Ages, but it was the moment their certainty died. From this silence would come higher wages, weaker feudal bonds, new fears, new ideas, and a deep awareness that human systems are fragile things. Europe did not collapse in 1348. It was forced to evolve. And that evolution would lead to new machines, new cities, and a new relationship between time, work, and power. If you want to understand why the modern world works the way it does, you have to start here, with the year everything stopped working. If this kind of storytelling matters to you, leave a like. It helps more than you think. And if you want to keep exploring the moments when history breaks and reforms itself, subscribe to the channel. I'm Tim, watching the past so we can understand the present. And together, we keep history reborn. I'll see you in the next era.